It's my pleasure to call the next speaker, Jeremy Gregory. He's the Executive Director of the MIT Climate and Sustainability Consortium.
Well, it's a pleasure for me to be here to talk to you about the work that we're doing in the Climate and Sustainability Consortium. It's a brand new initiative just launched this year, and it's a really different kind of initiative than others that are going on at MIT related to the climate and sustainability. And some of the context for it is just really what's going on with companies and their commitments to climate and sustainability. You're probably familiar with hearing about all kinds of net zero commitments in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. But there's a lot of companies that are also talking about circular economy and ways in which they can transform their businesses to be more circular. And then also, climate justice is something that's coming in. And this report here is talking about how to bring in climate justice into these different types of initiatives. So companies are talking about this a lot. They're making commitments. But I really like this headline from Fortune earlier this year. It was actually on January 1st. And it says, 2020 was the year of net zero by 2050. Commitments. So will 2021 be the year we actually get to the details, right? Like, it's one thing to set that, and it's great to set those ambitious targets, but it's another thing to actually figure out how to do it. And figuring out how to do it is difficult. In particular, when you're talking about how you do carbon accounting with value chains, it's complicated. This chart here is showing, the traditional way of defining Scope 1 greenhouse gas emissions, which are direct emissions from company-owned facilities. Scope 2 is indirect emissions associated with electricity. And Scope 3 is everything else. We call those value chain emissions. That includes upstream purchased goods and services. It includes business travel, employee commuting, waste, use of products. So doing all that calculations is complicated. But also, this is not something that companies can usually do by themselves. For example, this chart here is showing like a framework for how you think about circular economy. It's put out by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And what you can see on the left are flows of more renewable materials, like forestry, fishing, things like that. On the right are other kinds of more anthropogenic generated materials. And what you can see is that there's just no way one actor or even one sector can do this by itself, right? So even if you're really involved within your company's sector, you clearly are going to need other value chain partners in order to truly create a circular economy. And so the Climate and Sustainability Consortium was launched to be a new kind of academia-industry partnership. And our goal is pretty straightforward. It's ambitious, but straightforward. We want to vastly accelerate implementation of large-scale and real-world solutions across different sectors to help meet global climate and sustainability challenges. And there's a couple different ways in which we do this work. One is for developing strategies, working with our member companies in this consortium to try to understand what are the places where we're going to have the biggest impact? How do we link goals that they may have across entire value chains, build resilience across the value chains, and understand different blind spots? Two, then take some of those strategies and actually do implementation. Conduct workshops, design charrettes, pilot projects for cross-industry strategies. And these could be about technologies, but they also may be about processes or about organizational change, whatever it takes in order to accomplish our climate and sustainability objectives. And the last portion is to educate, to how do we really embed sustainability practice into whatever our member companies are doing. And so we have professional education portfolios that we're developing, and of course, things that we're doing here at MIT with undergraduates and graduate students. Now, at a high level, we say our mission is to link and leverage to solve hard problems. So MIT is very used to tackling hard problems, and some might say that these climate and sustainability challenges are the hard problem of our generation. But what we're doing is taking an approach where we're working with these member companies to do that. And what you can see across all of them, many names you recognize, maybe some you don't, but one thing is clear, that they're all from different sectors, and that was highly intentional. So when we say link and leverage, we obviously want to connect them to MIT, but we also want to connect them to themselves. It's great when both Boeing and Apple are talking about use of aluminum, which is something they both use a lot of, right, for different kinds of ways. And when Cargill and PepsiCo are talking about agriculture. So these are important links. But of course, we also want to link them to the MIT ecosystem. And some of these names you may also recognize as well from a whole bunch of different environmental related initiatives, including the recently launched Climate Grand Challenges, which is more a research initiative. So if we can connect these companies, our members, to what's going on campus, that can help us solve those hard problems. Now, this was really the brainchild of Ananthra Chandrakasan, our dean from the School of Engineering, and we have co-directors of Jeff Grossman and Elsa Olivetti, professors of material science and engineering. But it really is a multidisciplinary effort, and we emphasize that by having a faculty steering committee that's made up of people from all 5 of MIT's schools: engineering, sciences, humanities, urban studies and planning, and management. And even if you don't know what the course numbers are there for our departments, trust me that they do come from all of them. And the neat thing about having this faculty steering committee is that they really help us create this deep multidisciplinary perspective when we're working on these different challenges. Now, during our first year, which we're 3/4 of the way through already, we've established some goals that fall into those 3 buckets that I mentioned earlier. We have goals around developing strategies, which could include roadmaps to help us identify and then actually implement solutions. What are innovations that are needed? Producing some white papers that talk about that. But then once we've done that, we also want to establish what are specific themes we're going to be working on, create some workshops to identify what are some of the key elements of that, and then prototype innovations, perhaps technological innovations, but also it could be other kinds of process or organizational innovations as well. And lastly, education. As I mentioned, we're working on professional education modules, but also undergraduate research opportunities, or UROPs, which are special educational related opportunities for undergraduates here on campus. And our purpose is that we take everything that we do in those first 2 buckets and make sure we're training our future workforce with these elements as well. Okay? But our member companies are engaged in these processes throughout, and it's one of the things that really makes it special. And of course, that happens because they're engaging also with the MIT community, whether that be students, faculty, or other staff as well. So that's, I think, what makes it exciting. Now, just for some examples of some of the topics that we've been working on, I mentioned early in the year was when we started talking about different strategies, and then that led us to then implement workshops on some key topics that were of interest to our members. And so I'm going to go through them a little bit. The first one was about sustainable supply chains and decarbonizing tough transportation sectors. So just to give you an idea what happens in these workshops, we have some key members of our key representatives from our member companies talk about their expertise, and then we also get people from MIT to talk about it as well, and then facilitate some discussions on them. Another topic is what we call equity-centered strategies for circularity in organic materials, which is mostly about plastics related to packaging and textiles. Another topic was about community-engaged, nature-based solutions to carbon removal and decarbonizing agriculture. So it was really about forestry and agriculture. Fourth topic was equity-centered strategies for circularity in inorganic materials. And this was really about construction and demolition waste. and then also electronics materials. And then the last one was engineered solutions and entrepreneurial opportunities in carbon removal. And that was mostly about carbon capture and then utilization and sequestration. So you can see about all these topics, there isn't one that's just about decarbonizing the electronics sector or decarbonizing the food sector. These are all things that affect pretty much all of our member companies. One of the neat things about these processes is that we actually had someone who was, during the meeting, creating a representation of some of the key topics that came up in a visual manner. And it's this Haley McDevitt here. This is one that you can see that was about the sustainable supply chains and decarbonizing tough transportation sectors. But we also have other ones that are about, this is the community-based, nature-based solutions. Here's another about circularity of organic materials. And then the last one about circularity of inorganic materials. And I realize these are busy, but they show you just the number of ideas that come when we really get companies and then MIT together to talk about these different sectors. So I think it's a really exciting representation of what we're doing. This is also an example of showing you about how we're trying to even just connect people within the MIT ecosystem. This is a representation of who was participating in our workshops on circularity. And what you can see is that there's all 5 schools represented along with the Schwarzman College of Computing. And then around that, we also had representation from a few different initiatives on campus, from the Sloan Sustainability Initiative to Climate Grand Challenges or Environmental Solutions Initiative, MIGHTY, joint program. And then here's showing all the different faculty who are either directly engaged or indirectly connected to these topics. And so it's just a representation. When it comes to circularity, there's a lot of different ways that we can engage the MIT community on that. So, all right. So one of the last things I want to leave you with is we are looking for other members. So if this is something that you're interested in, the membership is $250,000 a year for a minimum 3-year commitment and then opportunity to renew after that. And from that, you get to participate in this, this process. There's identifying what are the impact pathways we're going to work on, representation on our industry advisory board, and connection to all those people I mentioned who are doing climate research here. We have a bunch of seminars and workshops that we're doing, undergraduate connections, to clubs and groups, and also entrepreneurship efforts as well. And so we intentionally set this up as a way to identify those pathways, come up with solutions. But if there is something that's of interest then that a company wants to pursue on a more focused research basis, there's an opportunity to then expand that relationship with a specific company and specific researchers. So just to close, I really want to emphasize, again, our motto here of linking and leveraging to solve hard problems. And I like this cartoon here that just came out in the New Yorker where they're kind of looking at what's going on in the world and saying, I think it's going to take more than reusable straws. And reusable straws are great, but at MIT, I think we're trying to go after those really difficult, hard to solve problems. And that's why we really appreciate having this collaboration between our member companies and those of us at MIT. So if you have questions, there's all kinds of ways you can follow up with us. And I look forward to hearing from you.